At the heart of Europe lies Switzerland. It's a surprisingly big little country. Small in area, but big on natural beauty. And like its many languages and cultures, its landscapes vary widely too. From mighty alps and dense forests to mysterious moors and roaring waterfalls. Switzerland has many faces, some familiar, some hidden. It's a country that's astonishingly rich in variety, wilderness, and scenic wonder. Sometimes beauty is not apparent at first glance. Things are not always as they seem. Some regions in Switzerland are less well known, so now is the time to discover them. This tree keeps its real age a secret. Known as Le Chêne de Bosse, the gnarled oak, it's said to have witnessed the changing of the seasons over 1,000 times here in the Swiss Jura. The Jura encompasses the entire low mountain region stretching from the northeast of Switzerland along the French border right down to Lake Geneva. The Jura is synonymous with time. It's given its name to an entire global epoch and is also home to traditional horological craftsmanship. There are traces of time or times gone by everywhere. The Jura Mountains are a kind of little brother to the Alps. Compared to the rest of Switzerland, the entire region is quite sparsely populated. That's why there's one thing in abundance here: peace and quiet. Usually, that is. But right now, it's spring in the northern Jura, and that means the mating season. The trees are alive with a chirping song contest. It's a musical competition for the favor of the females. They decide whether a male is a worthwhile breeding partner or not. Evidently, this nuthatch passed the test. In addition to their reproductive instinct, animals have one other overpowering driving force: hunger. The ermine moves as fast as lightning. But life at this pace takes a lot of energy, which means food. Mice are a favorite food. In the past, ermines were often kept as pets to keep farms free of mice. Because no mouse is safe anywhere near an ermine. One unguarded moment, and death is at the door. Death and life, the eternal cycle of nature. Under the first warming rays of sunshine, snowdrops and crocuses are the first to venture forth. Other flowers follow swiftly, like the cuckoo flower. And when these buds open, a touch of the Orient unfolds in the middle of Switzerland.
I think that's an interesting thing.
This one piece will make 52 layers.
Watch on mobile devices or the big screen, all for free. No subscription required.
Because later, they will result in a very special fruit, the damson plum. Legend has it that these Damascene plums were a souvenir brought back by the Crusaders from Damascus in Syria over 800 years ago. Its integration was a success. Today, it's a Swiss speciality and is enjoyed especially in high-proof, liquid form. Growing alongside them are apples, cherries and Mirabelle plums. It's no coincidence that the Jurassic Ajoie is known as the fruit orchard of western Switzerland. For the blossoms to become delicious fruit, however, a specific interaction is necessary, one that has worked for hundreds of millions of years. Blossoms aren't stingy with their charms in spring. Scent, color and shape, they use the lot to lure their pollinators. And it works. Bees need huge quantities of nectar and pollen to feed the brood in their hives. As they go, pollen grains get stuck to their bee fur and are carried from flower to flower. Bees are also true to a single variety. They remain with the plant species until the blossoms fade. It's a great advantage for fruit trees if only their own pollen dust is carried about. Plant or animal kingdom, new life is springing up everywhere. Here too in the nearby forests around the old Château Pléjoux. A whole pack of young foxes enjoys some unsupervised time. Their mother has probably gone off looking for food, as these 4 to 5 week old cubs can't do that yet. They still have no idea how serious life is. Hunters, cars, there are many dangers out there in the big wide world. But right now, that doesn't concern them. Fun and games are the privilege of childhood. Today, mountains rise up in the place where the Tethys Ocean lay in prehistoric times. Deposits of sediment led to the formation of limestone. One could say that the Jura Mountains are underpinned by the remains of seashells, corals and crabs. The characteristic karst formations of the limestone mountains aroused the interest of nature researcher Alexander von Humboldt. He named these rock strata after the place where they were discovered, Jura. Later, this name was adopted to describe the entire period of their creation. Almost as if a giant had left footprints. Funnels in the ground like these appear unexpectedly in karst areas. Called dolines, they're formed by the corrosive dissolving of rock in rainwater. This is also how subterranean karst formations are created, better known as stalactite caves. So far, 9,000 caves have been discovered in Switzerland, most of them in the Jura. One of these is the Reclair Cave. It affords a glimpse into the mysterious bowels of the earth, as well as a journey into the deepest mists of the past. Time seems to have stood still here. Stalactites grow at a rate of about 8 to 15 millimeters every 100 years. Drip by drip, sculptures are formed. The water evaporates, a wafer-thin lime deposit remains. Over millions of years, this process has created the astonishing works of art that fire our imagination today. Stalactites grow down from the ceiling. To start with, they form thin tubes. Because of this peculiar shape, they're called macaroni. Some of the stalagmites reaching up from the floor of the cave are more reminiscent of cannelloni. Reclair is where Switzerland's largest stalagmite reigns supreme. Known as the Cathedral, it's some 15 meters tall, and so is thought to be around 200,000 years old. In the cave, the temperature is a constant 7 degrees centigrade all year round. For some, these are ideal conditions in which to spend winter. "11 species of bat use the frost-free caves as their winter quarters. From November, when food becomes scarce, they retreat to the caves and go into a kind of hibernation to save valuable energy. Among them are the lesser and greater horseshoe bat, both of which are on the endangered list. For them to be woken now would be fatal, which is why the caves are closed to the public during winter. Much less well known than bats are the inhabitants of the subterranean lake. You have to look really carefully to spot them. Niphagus, a freshwater crustacean. About the size of a thumbnail, they feed partly on the remains of creatures who've strayed into the cave and got lost there, such as toads or mice. The powerful interplay of water and time. Its impressive results can be observed on the Earth's surface too. For millions of years, the Doubs River has coursed its way through the limestone, until a landslide blocked its way some 14,000 years ago. The result, the Lac des Brenets. Like a fjord, the lake winds its way between steep walls up to 80 meters high. At the Doubs Falls, the water cascades with tremendous force into the valley below. The waterfall has another feature. It also forms the border between Switzerland and France. For almost 500 kilometers, the river Doubs snakes backwards and forwards between France and Switzerland, as if it were unable to make up its mind where to go. In some places, the high rock walls make it almost inaccessible, so it's pristine, untouched by human influence. But there are also flatter stretches. This makes it flow at different rates, in some places very fast, and others more sedately. In between, it seems to pause and rest in peaceful pools. The area is home to black kites. They often frequent places near water so they can catch fish. This kite has caught something else. What it intends to do with this branch isn't entirely clear. Probably use it for nest building. Right now, it's breeding time for black kites in the Jura. It's a migrating bird and spends the winter in Africa. From March to September, it returns to Switzerland. The kite is a master of the art of gliding, using the smallest updraft to conserve strength. The River Doubs has plentiful fish reserves to provide the kite and other birds with the food they need to survive. But their idyll is at risk. The Doubs has a serious problem with environmental pollution. Agriculture, industry, and hydroelectric power plants all contribute to the threat posed to the river's abundant fish stocks. There are still areas that look almost untouched, where the Doubs still provides a valuable habitat. Especially as breeding grounds for waterfowl, on the banks or in the lake, where coots build their floating nests using twigs and water plants. The mute swan prefers to nest on the riverbanks. Its young could hardly be called ugly ducklings, though. It's never too early to start getting a bit of beauty sleep. The chicks stay with their parents for 8 to 9 months before they're independent. It's lunchtime for this family. With its long neck, the adult dives for aquatic plants deep underwater, the staple diet for swans, big or small. Nature conservationists have been trying to protect this paradise for years. They might succeed if especially the hydroelectric power plants are willing to reduce their use of the river. Whether that will happen remains to be seen. On some days, the moisture in the river valley draws skeins of fog across the landscape. This is good for the neighboring forests and fields. The juicy grass provides food for the region's large cattle herds. Many people here make a living from agriculture. The milk is turned into the Jura's famous cheeses, such as tête de moine. In the advancing early summer, whatever hasn't been eaten or mowed in the meadows bursts into colourful bloom. But the idyll can be deceptive. Danger lurks, hiding in wait. A crab spider is on the prowl. Instead of spinning a web, it waits patiently well hidden for its victims. This time, it's unsuccessful. These dramatic scenes of life and death take place in wildflower meadows thousands of times every day. To the south of the Doubs region lies the Franche-Montagne district, a territory with few people, but an abundance of fields. This region is home to an old Swiss horse breed, the Freiberger. Their ancestors came from abroad, but the Freiberger, also called the Franche-Montagne horse, has been bred in Switzerland for the past 200 years, and so they are held to be Swiss. Strong, calm, and even-tempered. These were the characteristics that made this horse so popular, especially as a workhorse and for the military. Today, favored as coach horses and for riding, they're the pride of the region. There's enough space in the Franche-Montagne for them to spend the entire summer in the fields, almost like the Wild West, except that it's in Switzerland. The Jura often seems to visitors to be a haven of peace. Even in the peak tourist season, there are no hordes of people. Time here often seems to have stood still.
Entre montagne et vallée, vois le soleil se coucher, comme il finit son voyage, l'ombre caresse les alpages, tous les rayons se reposent sur le glacier tout en rose, sur le glacier tout en rose.
The Swiss tourism hotspots aren't far, though. The famous Bernese Highlands are just across the way. The best view of their impressive peaks can be had from the Chasseral, one of the Jura's highest mountains. However, at under 2,000 meters, compared with the giants of the Alps, it's something of a dwarf. These animals rarely move away from the alpine region. Marmots. They were brought to the Chasseral in the 1960s. They settled in here quickly. Marmots have been around since the Ice Age and have learned to adapt. Today, there are several colonies along the entire mountain range. Flowers, leaves, or buds, whatever's juicy, protein-rich and vegetarian is used to tank up the fat reserves that have been lost during winter. Play fighting strengthens family bonds. But their motto is, stay alert. A shrill whistle sounds the alarm. And they all dive for cover. Not far from the marmots, on the barren limestone precipices of the Chasseral, narcissi and various types of gentian bloom and thrive. They prefer low-fertility soils, but these are becoming ever scarcer. Most gentians have one thing in common. To protect themselves from rain or cold air, they close their calyxes. Wild orchids, such as the purple orchid, are also in their element on the poor soils of the mountain fields. Southwest of the Chasseral, the vista opens up to the chains of the Jura mountain range. The limestone rocks and densely forested peaks are characteristic of the region. Jura, or forest, was what the Celts called this area. The name Jura might well have originated from this Celtic word, the forest region. There are many so-called Wutweiden dotted about, wooded pastures that are good for both agriculture and forestry. Known as the Dent de Vaulion, this towering mountain might be regarded as the tooth of time. At its foot lies the Vallée de Joux, home to many famous watch and clockmakers who are the economic backbone of the region. On the high pastures of the Jura Mountains, hikers will often come across dry stone walls. They're a legacy of the ancient Romans who brought the art of dry stone masonry to Central Europe, stone upon stone, with no mortar. For centuries, the walls were used to demarcate land from neighbors or to fence pastures. Many of them were replaced by wire and wood, becoming forgotten relics, in time blending in with their surroundings. Others are properly maintained. Whatever condition they're in, today we know how important they are for plants and animals. Valuable biotopes form inside and around dry stone walls. Whether small, like this wall lizard, or larger, like this mouse, all creatures appreciate a safe, dry hideaway. Away from the wall, life is much more dangerous. A fox is on the hunt for food, and a mouse like this would suit him perfectly. He searches through the high grass, all his senses honed to catch the slightest movement. Not even the faintest rustle escapes him. He can jump up to 6 feet into the air to perform his so-called mouse leap. And is sometimes rewarded with a plump water vole. Will he eat it straight away, or take it home to his young, or even store it for later? That's his secret. The mountain meadows of the Dent de Vaulion are a colourful organic home remedy centre. Many of the wild flowers growing here are held to have healing properties, such as the columbine. In earlier times, it was said to be effective against scurvy, but also prized as an aphrodisiac. The dead nettle is supposed to help against insomnia. This aerial acrobat seems wide awake, though, the hummingbird hawk moth. It's often mistaken for a colibri, as, like the hummingbird, it also hovers. This helps it maintain the right position to suck nectar with its long proboscis. Summer is the main blooming season for meadow flowers. Across the Vallée de Joux, even in July and August, temperatures are mostly moderate because the high valley lies at 1,000 meters above sea level. Its showpiece is the eponymous lake, the Lac de Joux. At 9 kilometers long, it's the largest lake in the entire Jura Massif. Not everyone is awake this early in the morning. Although there's a lot to do, it's breeding season for the great crested grebe. A thick reed belt is an ideal spot for its floating nests. Using aquatic plants, twigs and reed stalks, together the couple build a safe home for their eggs. The quiet southwesterly shore of the lake offers good breeding grounds, not only for the great crested grebe. It's popular with many other aquatic birds. Insects thrive in the marshy tributary of the Lac de Jura, especially dragonflies. Two become one, the dragonfly's famous mating wheel. Male and female dragonflies can be joined in this reproductive position for up to 6 hours. This damselfly is still on the lookout for a partner. Blue damselflies are rare, as their breeding ground requirements are very specific. The water can't be too warm, so high-altitude lakes are ideal. If they feel threatened, the males spread their wings and lift their abdomen to frighten off other dragonflies. But generally speaking, dragonflies are peaceful creatures. The Lac de Jura is fed by the Orbe river that rises in the French part of the Jura Mountains. Here, the River Orbe takes its natural course with loops, bends and curves. This meandering is due to the low gradient of the valley. Moorlands line the banks, making them hard to access. For a long time, the Vallée de Jura was inaccessible, so it was only settled very late. Hardly surprising, as to the west, it's completely sealed off by the Grand Rizou, the largest forested area in Switzerland. 200 years ago, wolves and bears roamed the area. Today, the forest still seems almost impenetrable. It's also the green border separating France and Switzerland. On clear days, Mont Blanc can be seen from here, the highest mountain in the Alps. But size alone isn't the whole story. Some small things are quite impressive too, even very small things. The Vallée de Jura is home to one of the largest colonies of red ants in Europe, with around 20 million insects. Every one of them appears to know exactly what their job is, but who controls the big picture? The intelligence and sensory skills of an individual ant are, to put it kindly, somewhat limited. The secret of this perfectly functioning collective lies in communication, because there's no one single determinant. Ants communicate via pheromones, odoriferous substances that they receive and pass on with their feelers. This enables them to identify members of the same colony. But the best feeding spots, possible sources of danger, ants also get all this information from the scent of others. And like a snowball system, the pheromonal cloud of knowledge spreads in a very short space of time. All of this serves a single purpose: survival of the species. The center of the colony is the nest, where the queen ant lays her eggs. Fir and spruce needles, twigs and resin, it's all used as construction material for this ant heap. The super colony of the Swiss Jura consists of around 1,200 nests like this, an entire empire, and an impressive wonder of nature in miniature. But the Jura is big on other things too. Another of Switzerland's largest and most impressive natural phenomena is located here. The Creux du Vent. The rocky arena is a geological feature, the result of erosion of the Jura Mountains after the last ice age. At the bottom, in the wooded caldera, there are still remnants of glacial moraines. The sheer rock walls plunge 160 meters down to the valley floor below. It's known as the Swiss Grand Canyon, an imposing monument to time. The caldera is one of the country's oldest nature conservation areas. Up on the plateau's alpine pastures, cows spend their summers. The Creux du Vent is a popular destination for hikers, especially those interested in botany. In addition to the breathtaking views, there's a treasure trove of colorful miscellany: the white anemone, yellow globeflower, or the meadow rue or Siberian columbine with its exotic-looking umbels. The Creux du Vent's rock faces rise steeply from the dense forests that reach right up to the high plateau. And here, with a little luck, one might encounter an extremely shy inhabitant. The lynx. Its shyness is not unfounded. The relationship between the lynx and humans is a difficult one. At the beginning of the last century, this predator was extinct in Switzerland. In the 1970s, a few pairs were reintroduced, among other areas, in Creux du Vent. In the meantime, the number of lynx in Switzerland has risen, and there is currently heated debate over whether they should be culled to protect the indigenous wildlife. But this feral inhabitant of the Swiss Jura still retains its protected status and luckily has many on its side. The Creux du Vent is situated in the middle of the Val de Travers. It's famous as the home of absinthe. This highly alcoholic drink, known as the Green Fairy, was held to be dangerous and outlawed for a long time. In the fir treetops, blue tits are girding themselves for the coming winter. Now's the time when nature yields all her fruits. In some cases, this can take quite a while. It takes 30 years before beech trees bear their fruit. But to make up for it, in some years there's a veritable glut of beech nuts. Oak trees also have boom years for acorns. They are merely ensuring that enough fruit will germinate in the ground. Because most of them are eaten before they do. Hungry forest creatures such as wild boar rout out as many acorns and beech nuts as they possibly can in autumn to fatten up for the winter. Autumn is a colourful time. As leaves die, they display their most splendid colours. Many forest dwellers begin to prepare themselves for their imminent winter hibernation. To survive it, the hedgehog has to gorge itself on as much food as possible, and it's not picky. Nuts, snails, beetles, every calorie counts. And the hedgehog is in a hurry. Every day brings fewer hours of sunshine. With less sunshine, leaves stop the process of photosynthesis, which produces their green coloring. They die off and fall. The further autumn advances, the thicker the carpet of fallen leaves becomes. For the fire salamander, this is a signal to begin its search for suitable winter quarters. It won't sleep here, but will be able to find shelter from the first frosts. Because these often arrive earlier than expected and without warning, especially in the higher altitudes of the Swiss Jura. And eventually, the time has come. Winter arrives. One region in Switzerland is especially closely linked with the cold season. It's actually quite famous for being cold. La Brévine, a high valley in the canton of Neuchâtel. Because of the valley's isolated location, so-called cold air lakes form here. Cooled air is heavy and stays near the ground. It cannot escape from the hollow of the high valley. People here say that there are only two seasons, winter and the next winter. Minus 40 degrees centigrade has been measured here, temperatures more likely to occur in Siberia. Not every year is that extreme, but life here is still a challenge, for man and beast alike. The thicker the snow cover, the harder it is to find food. A simple and bitter fact, not only for this deer. Some creatures clear the way for others. Badgers like this one are a rare sight now. It's normally hibernating. So why did this one venture forth? It may well have been woken by hunger. Hunger can make other animals restless too. This fox is looking for stores it set aside during summer, because hunting now would require too much energy. So this hare feels quite safe. The grooming process spreads its scent around its whole body, thereby marking its territory. Mobile communication, hare style. Sleeping through the cold months, the survival strategy preferred by many animals. Hollow tree trunks or nesting boxes are good winter quarters for the dormouse. It hibernates from September right through until June, more or less soundly. During hibernation, it loses up to 50% of its body mass. Energy saving is essential. The best motto is, keep calm and carry on sleeping. Winter in the Jura has many faces. Depending on the altitude, it can be covered with deep snow, or sometimes just bare and foggy, like here in the Jura's northeastern tip. The Bishop of Bâle had the Bonfol ponds artificially laid out at the end of the 18th century to keep him supplied with fresh carp. Today, these ponds are a nature reserve. In winter, the water temperature can be extremely cold, but there is still enough food for the ducks, so they don't have to move on. Like many other birds, ducks always have cold feet. Their special blood circulation ensures that their body stays warm, but their feet remain cold. This prevents them from sticking to the ice. Back to Swiss Siberia, where winter arrives first and leaves last. Back to La Brevine Valley. Near the village of the same name lies the Lac de Taillère, a typical karst lake. It has no inflow or outflow, maintaining its levels with rainwater and meltwater. The water from the lake seeps away, continuing to flow underground, and then, as if from nowhere, reappearing 6 kilometers away. Here it emerges from a rock, becoming the source for the river Areuse, the most important river in the canton of Neuchâtel. It supplies 70% of the population with drinking water. At 30 kilometers in length, the Areuse is not a long river, but it's nonetheless impressive. Even smaller bodies of water can excavate, given enough time. The Areuse has inexorably carved through the Jura rock, creating the wild, romantic Areuse Gorge. Our ancestors evidently also felt at home here. The remains of Stone Age cave dwellings have been found in the rocks above the gorge. The first warmer temperatures are an invitation to sunbathe. And for some, to dive. The dipper is one of the few songbirds that can swim and dive. Underwater, it collects insect larvae, a tasty snack. Sooner or later, the cold retreats. Winter is on the wane. And time marches on. A year has gone by. Another ring added to the trunk of the gnarled old oak tree. In its shadow, the world has turned again. And, deeply anchored, it continues to defy the rigors of time. Here in the Swiss Jura. At the heart of Europe lies Switzerland. It's a surprisingly big little country. Small in area, but big on natural beauty. And like its many languages and cultures, its landscapes vary widely too. From mighty alps and dense forests to mysterious moors and roaring waterfalls. Switzerland has many faces, some familiar, some hidden. It's a country that's astonishingly rich in variety, wilderness, and scenic wonder. On the southern side of the Alps, just 3.5 hours' drive from Bâle, lies Ticino, the Swiss enclave on the border with Italy. Switzerland's southernmost canton stretches from the main Alpine ridge down to the Po Valley in the north of Italy. Ticino is home to all the country's vegetation zones, making it a canton of tremendous contrasts. From palm trees to glaciers, the span of shapes and colors could hardly be wider. Like a mighty wall, the Alps hold back the cold from the north. As a result, the climate to the south is almost Mediterranean. While other parts of Ticino are still covered by a thick blanket of snow, around Lake Maggiore, spring is already in full swing. It's a season for all the senses. Blossoms are out in a dizzying array of colors, and numerous species of camellia perfume the air with their bewitching scent. The magnolias are also in full bloom. They are among the world's oldest plants, living fossils that have flowered since the Cretaceous period. Although they have no nectar, they do have nourishing pollen, a sweet temptation for bees that harvest it diligently among the labyrinth of pistils. Lake Maggiore. Only 1/5 of the lake belongs to Switzerland. The rest lies in Italy. What Ticino has in common with Switzerland is federal law, the Swiss franc, and price levels. Everything else is Italian: language, food, culture, and temperament. Over the past few decades, proximity to La Dolce Vita and a Mediterranean climate have attracted money to the once extremely poor canton. Today, lavish villas bear witness to the wealth that has migrated to the tourist centres of Ascona and Locarno. The rule is, the closer to the water, the more exclusive the location. Not everyone can afford direct access to the water. If you happen to be human, that is. But just a stone's throw from the lavish luxury and splendor, unspoiled nature awaits: the Bolle di Magadino, a large conservation area. Here, the Ticino and Versasca rivers flow into Lake Maggiore. The marshlands are an important habitat for animals. The combination of water and land is ideal for amphibians and reptiles. The harmless dice snake swims and hunts in the water, pausing occasionally to warm up in the sun. They like sunny spots too, the river cooter. These exotic creatures ended up here involuntarily. Freed illegally into the wild, they're now driving out the native pond terrapins. The Bolle di Magadino is above all a paradise for birds. Migratory birds as well as permanent residents, such as the goosander and the great crested grebe. Around 300 different species have been sighted here. The swamplands are especially busy in the mating season. Turf wars and nest building are the order of the day. The great crested grebes are constructing their floating nests. Many of these are anchored in the water, others are attached to tree trunks. Nest building is teamwork. During the breeding season, grebes are monogamous and the couples work together hand in hand, or beak to beak. The foundation is made of branches, and algae and leaves provide comfortable padding for the eggs. But offspring doesn't happen on its own. Among the mallard ducks, mating is already in full swing. As is often the case in the animal world, things can get a bit rough. Some ducks have actually drowned while copulating, but fortunately, not this time. The grebes are a little more elegant, starting with the courtship. This follows an elaborately choreographed ritual. The head shaking and plumage pecking are just the overture. First, they have to establish that they really harmonize. In the second act, there's the handing over of the bridal gifts. If this is accepted, they can finally start to dance. If the courtship has an appropriately successful outcome, the act itself is similarly civilized. The nest serves as a comfortable mating platform. As evening approaches, calm descends on the Bolle di Magadino once again. A calm in which the presence of human beings can almost be forgotten. But at night, with lights reflecting in Lake Maggiore, it's clear how densely populated it is. Locarno has only 16,000 inhabitants, but in high season, this can rise to 4 times as many. The shore is dotted with countless hotels. Lake Maggiore has been a popular tourist destination for decades. Sun-drenched promenades along the lake shore, the cafes, and the picturesque narrow streets invite visitors to stroll and linger. Culture, beach, and mountains, an ideal vacation spot for everyone and for the whole family. It's an angle used by travel companies to attract custom and has made tourism one of Ticino's main industries. Geographically speaking, Lake Maggiore marks the most low-lying and nearly southernmost point of Switzerland. In the middle of the lake lies a floating paradise, the Brissago Islands. The surrounding water stores the sun's warmth and releases it in winter, resulting in predominantly subtropical conditions almost year-round. The large botanical gardens on the main island uses this to full advantage. And the observant might even catch a glimpse of some fauna among the flora. A sea of blossoms provided by the rhododendrons is this lizard's hunting grounds. It can only spot its prey once it moves. But once in the hunter's sights, there's no escape for the victim. And the lizard enjoys its own version of la dolce vita. It's hard to imagine today, but at the beginning of the last century, Ticino was regularly gripped by famine. Being so isolated meant that industrialization and tourism simply never reached it. The barren soil made it mostly unsuitable for agriculture. The valleys in the hinterland were especially severely poverty-stricken. Ticino's real treasure has always lain in the beauty of its landscape. Just 50 kilometers away from Locarno, the Maggia Valley is a fine example. The Maggia drains most of the Ticino Alps. On its way to Lake Maggiore, it transports huge volumes of water as well as gravel and sand. Natural sandpaper that accentuates the individual patterns, grooves, and ridges of the rocks. The Maggia Valley is the largest meadow landscape in Ticino. Wide gravel banks and floodplain forests create a rich biotope. All 4 types of lizard native to Switzerland are found here in Ticino. The most common is the wall lizard, which is a past master at camouflage. The iridescent emerald lizard is far more striking. It's the largest indigenous lizard and is especially happy in the warmth of Ticino. Like all reptiles, lizards cannot regulate their own body temperature. They need to keep warming themselves up in the sun. Warm stone is a favorite for this. and there are plenty of them near the river. Insects breed on the water too, so there's food in abundance. Something that attracts the wagtail as well. It's an exceptional aerial acrobat. No insect is safe with the wagtail around, and it needs a lot of them as its hungry young are waiting back at the nest. This young wagtail's plumage is still brown. It's already fledged, but still has to learn the right hunting techniques. The adult birds demonstrate how to do it, especially how one can never stuff one's beak too full. On hot days, the turquoise waters tempt many people to take a cool dip, but it's not without its risks. After heavy rains, the water level can rise quickly, turning the Maggia into a torrential river. It's a danger that's often underestimated, costing several unsuspecting bathers their lives. But luckily, the water's elemental power is generally demonstrated in other ways. Over millennia, the river has ground and polished the rocks along its course. This decorative Maggia gneiss is also quarried, ending up decorating terraces and floors around the world. Heading north, the further away from Lake Maggiore, the harsher and more isolated the terrain. Many inhabitants were driven away from this rugged region. In the 19th century, whole villages left here and headed for America. But decades later, many of these emigrants returned with their newly accumulated wealth, making a tremendous contribution to the economic development of Ticino. Nature didn't miss the presence of human beings. A primeval forest flourished untamed in the mountains. Wild lilies thrive especially well in the damp earth under shady trees. One sound is typical of Ticino, the gushing of waterfalls. Some only occur in spring when the snow melts. Others can be admired year-round. The Foroglio waterfall at Val Bavona, for instance, that cascades over 100 meters in free fall down the rock face. The eponymous village of Foroglio is made up of traditional Ticino rusticos, simple stone buildings. It's one of 12 little hamlets in the Val Bavona, a valley only inhabited in summer. As early as the 15th century, the last farmers vacated the land. To this day, they only return in the warm summer months to put their cattle to pasture. Only one of the villages has electricity. The others use gas, petroleum and solar panels when necessary. But there's enough energy for everyone's needs. Half the electricity used in Switzerland is supplied by hydroelectric power. Lago Ritom, originally a glacial lake, was turned into a reservoir especially for this purpose 100 years ago. Countless streams carry the water down from the mountains, ensuring the lake is kept filled. Lago Ritom is one of 28 mountain lakes on the Val Piora, the largest high plateau in Ticino. Over 2,000 meters above sea level, it's home to a unique variety of almost all alpine plant species. A sea of flowers, from the white St. Bruno's lily to the alpine anemone. Especially in summer, the fields are a colorful, nutritious paradise for insects and butterflies. Ants are also fond of the plant's sweet calyxes. They gather nectar from the ovaries of gentians, helping to pollinate them as they do so. The common house leek, or hens and chicks, is often found in front gardens. It's undemanding and easy to grow. A Roman superstition held that it protected buildings against lightning strikes. No superstition, but an unusual natural phenomenon has drawn scientists from all over the world to the Piora Valley. In their idyllically located research center, they're studying samples from Lake Cadagno, which features a peculiarity that's almost unique worldwide. It has two extreme layers of water that never mix. The upper layer of water is oxygenated and filled with life, but the depths of the lake are a dead zone consisting of sulfur. Examination of various microorganisms from the lake have already shed light on how crude oil is formed under the planet's oceans. A great finding from a small lake. The Piora Valley's wonderfully diverse vegetation has also been the subject of research and documentation for centuries. The earliest records originate from the 17th century. Scientific theory doesn't interest the plateau's animal population, however. All they're concerned with is practical issues. The high nutritional value of the mountain plants is a perfect basic diet for marmots. They spend most of their time eating, and they're in a hurry. They only have the brief alpine summer months to put on the fat reserves they need to see them through the winter. They don't venture more than 100 meters from their burrows. Their aerial enemies are especially dangerous. But not this rare rufous-tailed rock thrush that breeds in rocky crevices. This female wheatear has been hunting for its brood. Wheatears build their nests under stone and gravel heaps in meadows. So they're the marmot's friendly neighbors. One of the reasons behind the wide variety of species in the Piora Valley is its specific geological setting. Crystalline and calcareous rock alternate with each other, providing ideal fertile ground for plants, which in turn offers food and protection for animals. Close to the timberline of the mountain forests, Swiss stone pines, larch and spruce trees thrive happily next to each other. On the other side of the valley, the first peaks of the Ticino Alps can be seen towering into the sky. Up here, it's still like the Ice Age in spring. At almost 3,000 meters, temperatures stay below freezing for a long time. But even in this seemingly perpetual winter, the power of the sun melts the mighty alpine snow masses, replenishing the waterfalls, streams, and glacial lakes. While the lemon trees are blossoming in the south of Ticino, up here the season has just begun for the alpine snowbell, the first to spring up out of snow-free patches of ground. The alpine primrose has its own padded nest that protects it from the cold and supplies it with moisture. Only plants that are masters of adaptation can grow here, like the gentian or the alpine anemone. The Alps are the centerpiece and true heart of Switzerland. From the passes of the Gotthard Massif, their peaks are revealed in all their glory.
Guarda per monti e per valli, sfugge il raggio del sol. Guarda sui pascoli cresce, presto l'ombra del buio, il sol s'avvicina al monte, oh, come son rossi ghiacciai, oh, come son rossi ghiacciai.
The rugged mountain terrain is perfect for ibexes. This goat is licking salt from the rocks. Like many herbivores, ibexes need an additional source of minerals to grow and flourish. Whoever believes they're alone in an isolated mountain world is wrong. This is where the Gotthard Pass runs, the main gateway to Ticino. For centuries, crossing the Alps was an exhausting business. It took around 50 hours to get from Bâle to Ticino by stagecoach. But with the construction of the railway tunnel, a link was finally created to the rest of the country and the modern era. And today, the new Gotthard base tunnel ensures an even faster journey to the south. The old Gotthard Pass, the Tremola, is today a heritage site and still a favorite among tourists who, rather than reaching their destination as quickly as possible, prefer to enjoy the view. The Gotthard Massif provides a barrier against the cold northern air, but the rain clouds from the south discharge their moisture before crossing over the Alps. This makes Ticino one of Switzerland's wettest cantons. It rains twice as much here as in Zurich. Marmots don't let a bit of bad weather interfere with their chief preoccupation, though. They ingest their fluid requirements at the same time as their food, which means they don't need to drink. There's just the right mix in the juicy lower stalks of these thistles. and they're not too prickly. Marmots are highly social creatures, living in groups of up to 20. They greet one another by rubbing noses, which also lets them identify by the scent whether they're related. Play fighting happens in the best of families. The Gotthard Massif is part of the European watershed. Apart from the Rhine, Reuss and Rhone, it's also the source of the Ticino River, which gives its name to the canton. Southeast of the Massif lie the highest pastures in Ticino. The cattle spend the entire summer outside in these lofty heights. But the number of farmers in the highlands is steadily decreasing. Their farms are simply too expensive to run. As a result, the scrub spreads, encroaching on the meadows and endangering their biodiversity. Cultivated land needs to be properly managed to prevent bushes and trees from taking over. The Jura Alp is an example of how agriculture and nature conservation can coexist harmoniously. When they mow the grass every 2 years, farmers are assisted by volunteers, helping to retain the precious biodiversity of flora and fauna. The slightly acid soil is an ideal habitat for all kinds of wild orchids. These pristine grasslands are home to a veritable microcosm of insects. The pearl-bordered fritillary is a sun worshipper. If it's too chilly down below, it heads for the heights. And its climbing abilities are quite extraordinary. Up at the top, the butterfly tanks up on sunlight. Once it's warmed up enough, it's off again. But life in the meadow isn't all sunshine and light. The oak spider's web is a cleverly spun death trap. The oak spider is an ambush predator. An alarm thread vibrates as soon as an insect gets trapped in the web. The victim is stunned with a bite. At the same time, the spider injects it with a poison that dissolves organs and tissue, turning it into pulp. The prey is dexterously wrapped up and taken to the spider's storeroom. And when the spider is feeling a bit peckish, the packages are sucked dry. Quite a different danger used to lurk in the Selva Secca, the biggest stone pine forest south of the Alps. Bandits would ambush and rob travelers, so no one would venture into the forest anymore. This was a blessing for the trees. Elsewhere, the Swiss stone pine was felled in its thousands for its valuable wood. But in the Selva Secca, these trees survived and thrived. The stone pine, also known as the Arolla pine, is ideally suited to the rough conditions in the high mountain region. It's practically the most resilient tree on the planet. Left alone, they can live for up to 1,000 years. The Breno River flows through the forest, cutting a deep valley into the rock on its way to the south. The river winds through the enchanted landscape and then passes through the Blenio Valley. There's a southerly feel to the so-called Valley of the Sun. The warm sunshine bathes the valley unobstructed. The area is famous for its chestnut trees. For a long time, they were the most important tree in Ticino. Their fruit was a valuable source of food for animals and humans, and the wood was used for building and fuel. Even wine grows in the Blenio Valley, but the main growing region for fine wines is the south of Ticino. The Sottoceneri is especially renowned for its vineyards. This is the famous sunniest corner of Ticino. It covers the area around Lugano as well as the southern valleys of the Mendrisiotto. Lake Lugano is the region's main attraction. It was formed during the Ice Age by the meeting of two glaciers. When they melted, a typically fork-shaped lake was created. Along the banks, picturesque villages cling to the hillsides. One of these is Morcote, formerly one of the most important trading ports between Switzerland and Italy. There's still a lot of trading around the lake. The city of Lugano has become the third largest financial center in Switzerland. Hardly surprising that there's plenty of traffic to and from the city. But just behind the wooded mountains, in the last alpine foothills, there's no trace of all that hustle and bustle. Here in the southernmost part of Switzerland lies one of its most unknown spots, the Muggio Valley. Gnarled old beech trees form dense forests. For some, however, it isn't the magnificent trees that attract them, but the dead wood. Dead beech trees are an important factor in the survival of one of Europe's rarest beetles, the longhorn beetle. Apart from its conspicuous blue color, the beetle's main feature is its long, hairy feelers. In the males, these antennae are even longer than their entire bodies. They're its most important orientation instruments. These sensitive feeling and scenting tools need very careful looking after. When two males meet, they immediately begin a duel, and only the winner may mate with a female, which is their main preoccupation in life. The difference in size between the genders is sometimes quite striking, though it poses no obstacle to their mating. The female carries the male around as a piggyback passenger. It's a practical way for him to ensure that no one else can steal his bride. The search for a suitable spot to lay her eggs is the female's job. She only deposits the individual eggs in the cracks of dead wood, preferably beech. The life expectancy of the European longhorn beetle is only a few weeks. The larvae, on the other hand, take up to 4 years to develop into fully formed beetles, which makes it even more vital for their survival that their dead wood nursery is left undisturbed. The European longhorn beetle has been around since the Ice Age, but what did the world look like back then, before humans populated the Earth? Some answers can be found in the Breggia Gorge. An archaeological chronicle carved by a river. Over time, the Breggia River has worn through the rock, revealing layers and traces that go back up to 200 million years. Fossils and other findings are embedded in the stone, providing information about the Earth's history and climate change over the millennia. They illustrate quite accurately how this region was formed, at a time when the Alps, as we know them today, didn't exist, but lay thousands of meters below the Earth's crust or on the floor of ancient oceans. In 2001, the first Swiss geopark opened here. Along the 1.5 kilometer path, visitors can take a trip back into the past. Witness to all these days past is the Monte Generoso. During the Ice Age, the mountain was a so-called nunatak, a peak sticking out of the thick ice shield. Like a kind of Noah's Ark, this enabled animals and plants here to survive the Ice Age. Some plants still grow here, like this type of wild peony. It's extremely rare and can only be found in a few places in Switzerland. In May and June, it blooms in full splendor. Far more common and seen all year round is the chamois. There are 350 of them living on Monte Generoso alone. The steep mountain sides pose no problem for them. Their hooves are elastic and have padded soles, giving them sure-footed confidence as they traverse the terrain. Their basic diet consists of grasses and herbs, and they'll go to any lengths or heights to get hold of them. Although usually quite shy, the Monte Generoso chamois are used to humans and so can be seen quite often. There's a bit more luck involved in sighting one very unusual wild creature. A herd of Haflinger run wild lives on Monte Generoso. These horses know no saddle, bridle, or bit. Since the death of their owner, a reclusive mountain farmer, they have wandered unobtrusively around the meadows of Monte Generoso. During the harsh winter of 2008, hunger drove them into the valley. The villagers there were not amused to have wild horses suddenly descend on their fields, gardens, and even cemeteries, eating everything in sight. There were calls for them to be captured or shot, but animal conservationists fought for the wild Haflinger. Since then, the horses are caught and kept indoors in winter and released again in summer. There are 25 animals in the herd today. Haflinger are robust and undemanding as long as they have enough to eat. They also ensure that the fields and meadows are protected from encroaching bush. Although these animals are not truly wild, they're allowed to keep their untamed nature and enjoy their summers of freedom to the limit. True symbols of freedom are the alpine swift and the common swift. They spend all their lives airborne. They can stay in the air continuously for up to 10 months, sleeping, mating, and catching insects. These gliders use uplift and let themselves be driven by the wind to save energy. They only land to brood and hatch their young. In autumn, they head for Africa, where they spend the winter. Migratory birds need safe stop-off points on their long journeys. Many of those from the north find their way to the Bolle di Magadino, the nature conservation area on Lake Maggiore. Several weeks have passed. The alluvial forests and bogs of the wetland are now resplendent with color. A reunion with the great crested grebes. Their eggs have hatched. The chicks are known here as pulli. A pair of adults can hatch up to 6 young. Only one of this pair's chicks has survived. Many pulli fall prey to predatory fish or birds. The parents supply a constant stream of small fish. As with the young of all creatures, the appetite of this little grebe is simply insatiable. Getting the feeding skill right is quite tricky. Fish like this are very slippery. Luckily, there's plenty of opportunity to practice. For the first few weeks, the young are carried on their parents' backs. The grebe is a precocial bird and can swim immediately after hatching. The parents feed their offspring fish and feathers. The feathers line their stomachs to protect them from sharp fish bones. The adult birds pull out their own feathers for this purpose. The chicks can dive very early on, too. Despite these little forays into independence, life is much more comfortable with mother. Even though the climb can be quite a challenge. The adult bird's feathers can't protect against every danger, but they do keep the chick nice and warm. The coots have had offspring too. The young birds' heads are a striking red color. They're also precocial, but stay with their parents for the first few months. The marshes of the Bolle di Magadino are not just ideal breeding grounds for birds, but also for gnats and flies. paradise for barn swallows. They only come here to hunt. Their nests are usually located close to human beings. In earlier days, they often built their nests in barns, hence their name. They truly are the king of the skies. Here, a few kilometers from lively Locarno, one could fancy oneself in another world. Wild landscapes not far from tourist promenades, rugged mountains next to lovely lakes. This is what makes Ticino what it is, the canton of contrasts. At the heart of Europe lies Switzerland. It's a surprisingly big little country. Small in area, but big on natural beauty. And like its many languages and cultures, its landscapes vary widely too. From mighty Alps and dense forests to mysterious moors and roaring waterfalls. Switzerland has many faces, some familiar, some hidden. It's a country that's astonishingly rich in variety, wilderness, and scenic wonder. Switzerland is also known as the moated castle of Europe. This description fits the Bernese Oberland uplands and surrounding region particularly well. Without the water supply from the Alps, Europe would be an empty desert. Millions of people would go thirsty. Huge swathes of agricultural land would be parched. Europe's largest rivers, the Rhine, Rhone, Danube, and Po, would dry up. Around 260 cubic kilometers of water flows down from the Alps every year, more than 5 times the volume of Lake Constance. The Swiss mountains play a key role. The melted snow, ice, and glaciers supply Europe with water. But the mountains also act as rain catchers. The humid air from the Atlantic collides with the massive wall of mountains, releasing its moisture in the form of precipitation. One of the most beautiful results of all this moisture is the mountain lakes. Some, such as the Bachalp Lake above Grindelwald, are covered with ice right through until summer. It's hard to find any life in these lakes. The water is too cold and the winters too long. and many of these areas are extremely isolated. Any passing waterfowl that might have a few fish eggs stuck in its feathers would hardly consider stopping here for a rest, which means that some of these lakes seem almost to be underwater deserts. Famously, the weather in these mountains can change within minutes. Grey skies, misty, damp air and rain doesn't exactly gladden most hearts, except for one rather special creature. The alpine salamander likes these conditions. It might be native to the Alps, but that certainly doesn't mean it's good at climbing. At 85% humidity level, these mainly nocturnal creatures will also venture forth during the day, and it can often seem to be raining salamanders. A salamander wanting to get back to its cave won't be put off by even the sheerest rock face. And another try. Nearly made it. Its sensitive skin, equipped with poisonous glands to protect it against predators, must be kept moist. That's why it's important that it reaches its shelter when the weather turns fine. Before the sun comes out, the salamanders disappear without a trace, only to reappear again when it rains. The Androsaci vandelii wait for sunshine and the insects that appear with it. Yellow blossoms signal to the bees, "I need pollinating." But pink ones say, "Fly on, there's nothing more to fertilize here." Alpine flowers need special strategies to survive the harsh conditions. This is one of the world's most famous flowers, the mythical alpine edelweiss. The typical sheen of the leaves around the bloom comes from tiny air bubbles that reflect the light, attracting insects and protecting the leaves from the strong, high-altitude ultraviolet rays. When the yellow bellflower blossoms, it's doomed. Some can grow for up to 10 years before they blossom once and then die. Fine hairs on alpine flowers protect them against the harmful UV light rays that are stronger in the mountains, as well as from dehydrating in the thin air and dry foehn winds. Not all gentians have blue flowers, but the intense color gives it a high sun protection factor, and as a positive spin-off for the plant, bees find the blue irresistible. The golden root needs neither other roseroot plants nor insects to reproduce. At a pinch, it will do so on its own. Another adaptation to the hardships of life in the high mountains. They look quite artless, these colorful alpine flowers, and yet they're absolute experts where it comes to sophisticated survival strategies. In Switzerland, these seemingly idyllic mountain pastures with farmhouses dotted about are simply called Alp. The cattle spend their summer here while their milk is converted into the renowned Alpine cheese. More than 100,000 dairy cows spend the Swiss summer on an Alp. Since the Bronze Age, farmers have been bringing their cattle to summer, as they call it, in the mountains. The lush green meadows, with their multitude of aromatic herbs, suggest a natural biotope, but appearances are deceptive. Alpine meadows are a man-made landscape. Without active cultivation and care, the forest would once again encroach and overrun the meadows. In some regions, the ground is too damp, and cows sink deep into the soil while grazing. Some farmers keep special cows. However formidable these creatures might look, Scottish Highland cattle are smaller and lighter than others of their species. They provide excellent meat, but unfortunately not very much milk. Here, on the Imbrig Alp, these cows are on night duty. During the day, they are plagued by biting houseflies and horseflies, so they graze at night and go back into their cowshed in the morning. Everyone knows their place and what needs to be done. Even in summer, the more than 4,000-meter-high mighty giants in the Jungfrau region are covered with ice and snow. There are very few plants and animals that are able to survive here. The ptarmigan is a little like the chameleon of the mountains. In summer, its plumage takes on the color of the rocks. As autumn approaches, and with it early snowfalls, the first white feathers start to appear. Gradually, white as snow becomes the fashionable shade of the season. One might almost think that wallowing in the snow turns the birds white. In actual fact, the snow baths help to get rid of their itchy summer plumage. The birds' perfect adaptation to their surroundings is no surprise. They are relics from the Ice Age and have been as much a part of the Alps, and for as long, as many of its glaciers. In winter, the ptarmigan is to all intents and purposes invisible. It can be quite startling for unwary hikers to have a perfectly camouflaged ptarmigan suddenly rise up out of their path at the last moment and flap away. Ptarmigans generally spend the summer at over 3,000-meter altitudes. The temperatures up here on the Jungfraujoch saddle only climb above 0 degrees in the summer. But even in July, there are up to 18 days of frost, although these conditions are apparently not Arctic enough to put some birds off living here. The alpine chough can be found in the Asian highland Taklamakan desert region, as well as the Balkans, Pyrenees, and the northeast African Atlas Mountains. They can breed at altitudes of up to 3,800 meters. There's a very large colony of these birds on the Jungfraujoch, thanks to 1 million tourists and the remains of their picnics that get left behind. Three large ice streams flow together in confluence below the Jungfraujoch, forming a 900-meter thick ice shield. Alpine glaciers have been around for perhaps 2.5 million years, and though it's hard to imagine, these pictures clearly show the unthinkable. The eternal life of this ice mass is coming to an end. The ice has gradually retreated by over 100 meters since 1850. The cause is climate change, which affects Switzerland more than many other countries around the world. In the valley below, near Grindelwald, the effects of climate change can also be seen. At the foot of the Mettenberg, some bushes are clothed in a fine silk webbing. Many of these delicately silken-clad trees and bushes are also stripped clean. The ermine moth caterpillar has taken firm hold here. It loves warm, dry conditions, and climate change is greatly to its advantage. The extensive silk covering protects them against rain and hungry predators. None of this disturbs the affected trees. As soon as the caterpillars turn into butterflies and fly off, the trees sprout new leaves. The ichneumoniid wasp is the caterpillar's greatest natural enemy. With its long ovipositor, it deposits an egg inside a caterpillar. The wasp larva hatches and grows inside the caterpillar, devouring it alive. But if the silk is too thick, the parasitic wasp has no chance. Its ovipositor cannot pierce it. With the warmer climate here, these webs are more common and larger areas are affected. A more dramatic sign of climate change is demonstrated by the glaciers. There are around 5,000 glaciers across the Alps. After the oceans, they are the Earth's biggest water store. Glaciers store almost 3/4 of all the fresh water on the planet. Their weight distorts rocks and grinds down whole mountains. But they are shrinking. Since the mid-1800s, almost half the entire glacier surface of Switzerland has disappeared. In the summer of 1744, Swiss artist Caspar Wolf painted the lower Grindelwald glacier. Today, it has disappeared. The Geltenhorn Saddle and Gelten Glacier in the Lauenen Valley are today barely recognizable. All that's left of the massive ice shield and fern areas are only scanty snow patches. Entire mountain panoramas have been altered by global warming. Both the Grindelwald glaciers used to reach right down to the bottom of the valley. People used to sell the ice to cool food transported to Paris. In 2007, the glacial ice had melted quite far back. The valley floor was several hundred meters away. And today, from the valley, there is almost nothing to be seen of what was the massive upper Grindelwald glacier. The black Ticino River now flows where once, not long ago, the valley was filled with a thick mass of ice. Rock walls, ground smooth by the ice, bear witness to the old glacier. What was once one of Switzerland's foremost tourist attractions is no more than forgotten splendor. And there is no end to climate change in sight. It's estimated that in some 80 years, only the mightiest glaciers will be left. The cause is global warming, both natural and man-made. Compared to the others, the Stein Glacier in the Susten Pass is an absolute sprinter. In just 1 year, it has retreated by more than 150 meters, making it one of Switzerland's fastest disappearing glaciers. Before the meltwater escapes, it flows under the ice towards the valley floor, picking up pulverized rock along the way and emerging from the glacier's snout as glacial milk. Sometimes one can go right up to a glacier's terminus, though the constant risk of collapse makes this quite dangerous. Hikers who prefer not to end up like Ötzi the Iceman should keep their distance. The world beneath a glacier is ephemeral. These ice sculptures change constantly. It won't be long before they disappear completely. But the Stein Glacier doesn't just reveal the beauty of nature, it also demonstrates its hazards. The melting glaciers leave behind numerous dangers for mankind. Landslides and ice avalanches can occur along the sides as the retreating ice mass is no longer there to support the rock walls. Even the meltwater can be dangerous. All over the Alps, new lakes have formed. Some empty themselves in catastrophic floods that cascade down into the valleys with tremendous destructive force. The upper Stein Lake has not yet broken its banks. The lower one has done so twice. Not far from the Stein Glacier, meltwater brooks meander across a plain. Here, a mysterious, though small-scale disaster has occurred, a so-called crime of nature. This little meltwater pond is full of corpses. What carried off these frogs en masse? Was it a virus, perhaps? Or the skin fungus that has killed frogs all over the world? Creepy, insect larvae and fish have also fallen victim to the sinister killer. So what happened? The answer to the gruesome riddle proves that nature is not cruel, it is just appallingly indifferent. Right in the middle of the frogs' mating season, the meltwater pond suddenly froze solid. The creatures all suffocated. But the story does have a happy ending. Before they died, some frogs did actually manage to mate. Protected by the gelatinous frog spawn coating, many frog larvae survived the deadly frost. So in future, the Stein Glacier will still be home to frogs. The immense volumes of water in the Swiss Alps, in the form of snow, ice, rain, standing and flowing water, have shaped the mountains anew for millions of years. Water sculpts entire valleys in the rock. Water freezing in crevices and fissures bursts the stone. Rocks, stones and sand, so-called debris, swept along by water, help to form entire landscapes. In the course of time, this creates unique wonders of nature. Here, water demonstrates what it can do over thousands of years of gradual perseverance. During the Ice Age, the meltwater from the Jura Glacier gouged out no fewer than 7 deep gorges in a rock plateau. One of these gorges is today the riverbed of the River Aare. For some, it's an eerie place. The gorge is said to have been the home of a mythical millipede-type dragon. The sheer rock walls rise up to 180 meters. At its narrowest point, it's just 1 meter wide. The Aare flows quite sedately through the gorge here, but meltwater from the high mountain regions can behave quite differently. The Trümmelbach, fed by the waters of the Jungfrau, Mönch and Eiger, has excavated no fewer than 10 waterfalls into the rock. Over 20,000 tons of debris every year have created a partly subterranean ravine, through which the water rages with full force. But even in this whirling, churning chaos and infernal thundering, there are moments of poetic beauty. It's no surprise that this incredible landscape has inspired so many artists and writers. Sir Arthur Conan Doyle chose the Reichenbach Falls as the scene where his master detective Sherlock Holmes dies. The Reichenbach Falls, as he wrote in his story The Final Problem, is indeed a fearful place. The torrent, swollen by the melting snow, plunges into a tremendous abyss from which the spray rolls up. The shaft is an immense chasm lined by glistening coal-black rock and narrowing into a creaming, boiling pit of incalculable depth. And the thick, flickering curtain of spray, hissing forever upward, turns a man giddy with its constant whirl and clamour. No fewer than 72 waterfalls plunge into the Lauterbrunnen Valley below, each more impressive than the last. Glaciers milled the valley out of the stone. Its almost sheer rock walls are several hundred meters high. But the water of the Staubbach Falls doesn't always reach the bottom. Often it's completely dispersed by the wind. In the 1930s, John Ronald Royal Tolkien visited the Lauterbrunnen Valley. He was so impressed by it that it inspired him. In his Lord of the Rings trilogy, there is also a place that is surrounded by high rock walls with cascading waterfalls. Rivendell, the elven town. Once the water has left the mountains, all the roaring, booming and foaming is over. The white Ticino flows quite tamely in the direction of the Jura. Since leaving the gorge, the Jura itself has become a long, peaceful river. This is partly due to its canalization. Malicious tongues claim that the Jura isn't actually a river, but rather a 288-kilometer-long production site for the energy sector. It has been dammed for numerous hydroelectric power stations, like this one on Lake Biel, which it flows through. It didn't always used to do that, though. It's forced to by a man-made canal. And then heads straight as a die towards the River Rhine. But despite the power stations and canalization, there are several places where the Jura also shows its real face. In nature reserves such as the Alta Aare wetlands, at least parts of the River Aare are allowed to flow as they wish. It's conservation with an ulterior motive. The wetlands provide a floodplain, protecting people and their villages from floods. Countless ponds and pools in this landscape are teeming with life. Some of the inhabitants might not be instantly recognizable to everyone, though. Few people get this close to tadpoles. Up in the mountains, it can sometimes take a year for tadpoles to develop into frogs. And then the baby frogs have to survive the hard winters. Below on the Swiss plateau, it all goes much faster. Warm sun and plentiful food in the form of plant parts reduce the tadpole's transformation period to a couple of weeks. As soon as its legs have grown, the future frog can easily be identified. But the tadpole still has gills like a fish and cannot yet survive on land. Its final transformation goes against the current zeitgeist. It changes from being a vegetarian to a dedicated carnivore. One animal that vanished from Switzerland for a long time now turns up more often and leaves very obvious traces. During the day, it's rarely seen at all. One has to wait until after dark to catch a glimpse of it. The fact that beavers are sighted more frequently is the result of a successful reintroduction program. Since the 1950s, 141 beavers have been released into the wild. Today, they number over 3,000. They're notorious tree fellers. They can't climb, so they fell trees instead to get at their juicy leaves. If they think the water level in their territorial water is too low, they will build effective dams. That doesn't appeal to everyone. Beavers only eat plants, and they're not fussy. Anything green tastes good to them. Their diet consists of an astonishing 300 kinds of plants. Not a particularly sociable animal, beavers are either solitary or live in close family groups. Males and females pair for life. They're impossible to tell apart. Only beavers themselves recognize a male from a female. For nature, the beaver is a blessing. Where it builds dams and creates pools, the groundwater increases and plants can grow better. Their tree felling allows more light and warmth to reach the forest floor. And its pools are also valuable biotopes, teeming with life. The nature conservation area that this beaver has selected as its habitat looks like an impenetrable jungle. It's hard to believe that this jungle is a tiny island in the middle of an industrial area. Water creates landscapes in Switzerland that one wouldn't normally expect to find here otherwise. Moors. In the Entlebuch Biosphere Nature Reserve between Bern and Lucerne, there are more than 100 moors and upland bogs. They were created after the last ice age, around 10,000 years ago. Over the centuries, huge areas of bog were drained as human beings needed the land, or they extracted the peat for heating. But in Entlebuch, 2,000 hectares of moor was retained, a unique habitat. Inconspicuous yet rather special, the alpine blue grass has adapted to the brief alpine summer. It doesn't form seeds that have to go through the elaborate process of germination. The grass is viviparous and bears fully germinated seedlings, including greenery and roots. There's a creature hiding somewhere in this picture. This green huntsman spider is a female, as its completely green camouflage reveals. The males have a red stripe down their backs. Not all insect eaters have legs. The butterwort bears white or purple flowers. Larger creatures, such as the smooth newt, have no reason to fear the plant. But for insects, the leaves of the butterwort are a death trap. The plant digests the insects alive. The same goes for the sundew. It has sticky glands that it uses to catch its prey. The sundew relies on its carnivorous meals. It cannot get enough nutrients from the poor soil of the moor. Moors are very moist regions, formed among other things by rainwater that cannot drain away. In Entlebuch, a very different landscape has also been created by rainwater, not stagnant, but flowing. The rainwater has created a bizarre landscape out of the limestone mountain, but the Schrattenfluh wasn't formed like the gorges in the Alps by minute quartz particles in the water grinding the rock away. The Schrattenfluh was formed by chemistry. The slightly acid rainwater dissolved the limestone, creating fissures and grooves. The Schrattenfluh is as full of holes as Swiss cheese. Some 250 kilometers of caves have been discovered by researchers to date, but the Schrattenfluh is probably riddled with many more holes, shafts and tunnels. On the cave floor, a surprise: imprints of seashells and corals. Inconceivable that deep below the Earth's surface, many millions of years ago, this place once looked like this. For a long time, the question of where the leached rainwater actually flowed to remained a mystery. Some of it covers quite an impressive distance. It's transported by subterranean streams to Lake Thun, almost 20 kilometers away. Lake Thun is one of the nearly 1,500 lakes in Switzerland. Apart from the coldest mountain lakes, they're generally highly biodiverse habitats. Several Swiss lakes, including Lake Sempach here, are home to a highly controversial animal. It can turn fishermen and fish farmers red-faced with anger. Their accusation: the creature eats too many fish, and is emptying the lake. The cormorant used to visit Switzerland as a migrating bird. It stayed a short while and then left. But increasingly, cormorants decided not to leave Switzerland. The number of breeding pairs has meanwhile risen to around 1,500. At Lake Sempach, there's a small colony nesting in 3 or 4 trees. Each nest holds between 2 and 4 chicks. There's a fair division of labor among cormorants. One adult bird guards the brood, keeping them warm in the cold and providing shade in the heat. The other adult bird tirelessly provides food. The young beg for food by nudging the adult bird's beak. The adult bird stores the fish it's caught in its throat pouch, which the chicks empty quite quickly. The biggest chick has the best chance of survival, because not every chick makes it. The smaller ones have to ensure that they don't get a raw deal on the food. Life in the breeding colony has one disadvantage. One can never be sure what will come one's way from above. Whether cormorants are actually emptying the lake hasn't been scientifically proven yet. But even if they were, they're unlikely to allow themselves to be chased away from Switzerland's lakes anytime soon. Slowly but surely, the Aare flows to its final destination. The further onwards it flows, the more densely populated the countryside. Little traditional villages, like picturesque Buren, dot its banks. Its passage is now largely channeled and controlled, but the Aare has 2 faces, one tame and predictable, the other wild and natural. Alongside the canal-like river, there are wildly romantic stretches many kilometers long. Finally, in Koblenz in Switzerland, the moment arrives. The Aare flows into the Rhine. There's something of an injustice here. The Aare actually carries a larger volume of water, so the Rhine ought to be a tributary of the Aare, not the other way round. A few kilometers upstream, the otherwise sedate River Rhine demonstrates that it is quite capable of a bit of drama. Although the mighty river at its source is rather more idyllic, almost like a little mountain stream. But the birds are well advised to stay close to the banks, because in the center of the river, there's all hell let loose. In summer, 600 cubic meters of water descends here every second, making the Rhine Falls one of the biggest waterfalls in Europe. Even though at 23 meters, it's far from being the highest. But the Rhine Falls at Schaffhausen are one of the most impressive natural wonders that Switzerland has to offer. The fact that this splendid phenomenon still exists is sheer luck. It's often been suggested that the Rhine should be made navigable along its entire length. The Rhine Falls would just have been in the way. But fortunately, these plans all came to nothing. Today, the Rhine Falls are no longer seen as a nuisance, but rather one of the most spectacular places in Europe, a sight not to be missed, either by day or by night. The passage of water through Switzerland is a journey through widely diverse, beautiful landscapes and splendidly pristine nature. All life depends on this water, also that of the people who drink it, irrigate their fields with it, or use it to generate power. Without the water from the Alps, life as we know it in Switzerland and in Europe would be impossible. So there is concern at the alpine winters becoming drier, the summers warmer, the breathtaking pace at which the glaciers are disappearing. But nature, finding refuge in so many places in a densely populated country like Switzerland and still flourishing, has a valuable lesson to pass on. Climate change will bring far-reaching changes, but nature will surely find a way to adapt. At the heart of Europe lies Switzerland. It's a surprisingly big little country. Small in area, but big on natural beauty. And like its many languages and cultures, its landscapes vary widely too. From mighty Alps and dense forests to mysterious moors and roaring waterfalls. Switzerland has many faces, some familiar, some hidden. It's a country that's astonishingly rich in variety, wilderness, and scenic wonder. To the east of Switzerland, bordering on Italy and Austria, lies Graubünden. Its best-known towns are Chur, Davos, and St. Moritz. The entire canton is situated in the Swiss Alps. These images make the hearts of skiers and snowboarders beat faster. A picture book winter with sunshine, biting cold, and plenty of snow. Graubünden is a winter wonderland. But fun on the slopes and après-ski pleasures are only one aspect of a Swiss winter. Winter in the Alps can also be deadly. It heaps snow and ice mercilessly over everything in its path. Anything not properly prepared will find it difficult to survive. Just the sight of this is enough to make humans freeze, yet these cold, rocky valleys and inhospitable forests are wildlife habitats, even at sub-zero temperatures and in lethal winter storms. Oddly, for a highland region animal, the ibex doesn't actually like snow. It will go out of its way to avoid it. But in very snowy winters, that's pretty well impossible. In addition to frozen food, an itchy winter coat is a constant irritation in the cold season. But the ibex can always find a good solution. As for smaller, more delicate or sensitive creatures, they're best advised to take refuge under the snow. Despite snow being nothing more than frozen water, it actually works as a kind of thermal insulation. Nature can be a ruthless killer, but it can also be an inventive lifesaver. It offers plenty of options for animals to survive the winter. For marmots, their survival strategy is hibernation. However, hibernation isn't actually sleep. It's anything but restful. It's an emergency situation in which animals shut down most of their bodily functions to save energy. Hibernating is so exhausting for the animals that they have to wake up periodically to get some proper sleep. Without these breaks from their hibernation, they would perish. Some creatures don't sleep. They chill. This way, even the most delicate summer beauties can survive the winter, including the brimstone butterfly. It's a kind of alcoholic. Its body's sugar alcohol, glycerine, helps it to survive the winter. There's an entire kingdom spending winter in this heap. Workers, larvae, and of course a queen. Ants also spend the cold months hibernating. Many survival experts spend their winters well protected underground or in hollows they've chewed into dead wood. They're not worried about the cold. A warm winter, on the other hand, would be a death sentence. Fungi and bacteria would decompose them like rotting wood. Inside a reptile's cave, it can be up to 5 degrees centigrade, even though outside it might be snowing and stormy. But even an internal anti-freeze system or a cozy cave can be insufficient protection against extreme winters. If ice crystals form inside their bodies, the cells burst, and then it's all over for the hibernating creature. In winter, the days might be cold and hostile to life, but the nights often turn into an icy hell. It can plummet to 30 degrees below zero and colder. Not much fun for anyone or anything. This is when the ibex switch to energy-saving mode. They sink their body temperature down to 15 degrees centigrade in their legs. For other animals, that would be fatal, but it enables the ibex to survive. A glimmer of hope on the horizon. The first light of the rising sun not only heralds a new day, it also means spring is a little closer. Finally, the icy night is over, this time without claiming any victims. With a kind of stubborn tolerance, the animal kingdom has survived another brutally cold night. The ibex have spent the night sheltered from the wind. Now they have a specific goal in mind. They plan to reach it during the morning, but they're not heading down towards the warmer valleys. They're going uphill. Higher and higher they go, on legs stiff with cold. They'll need a bit of luck. What this ibex procession is hoping for doesn't appear every day. Only if they can occasionally drive out the cold from their freezing bones by sunbathing can they survive the wintertime. They'll even tolerate the scanty food supply among the steep rocks just to spend some time in the sun. It can often take until afternoon for these alpine ibex to warm up and get their stiff joints supple again. Only then do their spirits return too. By this time, other animals have long been busy finding their breakfast. The fox needs around 20 mice a day to survive, but in winter, it's not that easy to catch them. Its sharp sense of hearing reveals even the quietest mouse. By fine-tuning its hearing, it can locate a mouse to the millimeter. Next comes the mouse jump, a miracle of precision and accuracy. Nothing can save the mouse now. Apart from a frustratingly hard snow crust. But the fox isn't about to throw in the towel that easily. This mouse and 19 of its brethren won't have much of a chance today. A 1,000 meters higher up, another act unfolds in the drama of life. Now in December and January, it's the rutting season. By a special kind of sniffing known as the Flehmen response, the ibex males can smell which goat will soon be ready to mate, or which one is already estrus. Ranking fights that take place in winter are mostly playful skirmishes. The animals have to conserve valuable energy, so the males only push each other around a bit. They already know which of them is strongest and therefore allowed to mate. They established that back in summer when they were all well fed. But these two apparently have more issues to sort out between themselves. The fight even continues the next morning. A blow just 1/60th of the force of these would fracture a human skull. But ibex skulls are made up of movable plates with a cartilaginous buffering substance between them that cushions the blows. The imposing bucks aren't the only ones that indulge in skirmishes. Sometimes the females fight as well. Are these also ranking fights? Or just bad-tempered female spats humans would call catfights? No one knows, but they certainly look serious. The loser is chased away, humiliated. In winter, the world might appear empty, lifeless, and lonely. There are very few animals about. They're mostly hiding from the cold or have dug themselves in underground. The only birds to be seen are the ones that usually stay behind, birds of prey like the eagle. The migrating birds have all gone, fleeing not only from the cold, but also from hunger. There's not much nourishment about for insectivores in this icy world. The only survivors here are survival experts, and those who have help. In a hard winter with permafrost, freezing rain, or a closed blanket of snow, bird feeders help songbirds survive. Domestic birds, such as tits, would probably survive without food, despite the harsh conditions. Anyone standing around in the snow for too long gets frozen feet. The tits are no exception. The feeding of songbirds is a controversial issue. In many cases, it supports species that are already very common, and some bird feeders become infested with germs, spreading deadly diseases. The nuthatch wedges its food in tree bark cracks. That way it can crack things open. In summer, insects. In winter, seeds and nuts. This squirrel is doing well. It lives in a coniferous forest where it can find food all year round. So it can be quite lazy during summer, unlike its relatives that live in deciduous forests that have to lay down supplies of food. The red crossbill has the perfect survival tool. Nature has shaped its beak like crossed spruce seed pincers. The red crossbill's life is closely intertwined with the spruce. In years where the trees carry few seeds, the birds migrate away. In intensive fruiting years, forests can experience actual crossbill invasions, so the crossbill is a sporadic migrant. One-third of Switzerland is covered in forest. That's around 500 million trees, which works out to around 60 trees per Swiss citizen. Forests are so important to the Swiss that they have a unique law. Whatever was once forest may never be cleared. Because forest equals protection. Protection against avalanches, landslides, and floods. The forests prevent damage worth 4 billion Swiss francs every year. "25,000 species of animals depend on forests." Switzerland's largest wild animal is also a forest dweller. As soon as the first snow falls, the red deer move from the mountains down to the valleys. Their survival strategy? Save energy. To protect themselves from the cold, they grow a warm topcoat of long fur. They also reduce their body temperature, shrink their digestive organs, lower their pulse, and stand still a lot of the time. Their lives depend on them staying quiet. Every time they have to gear up their cooled down bodies, to flee for instance, a stag can use up so much energy that it's no longer able to survive through until the end of the winter. Weaker animals haven't a chance of survival, but their death provides a source of food for others. There are around 200 lynxes in Switzerland, the result of a successful reintroduction program. This lynx seems to be an accomplished hunter. It's apparently so full that it's going to freeze the rest of the carcass for later. This herd of deer is lucky. They've found a south-facing slope where they don't need to dig around much for their food. These deer will stay here all winter. A 150 years ago, the red deer was extinct in Switzerland. Today, there are around 35,000 of them here. The first to return were fugitives from stag hunts in Austria. Some forests in this region are rather special. They're Swiss stone pine forests and very rare. Only 1/100th of the forested land in Graubünden consists of stone or arolla pines. Here they're known as Queen of the Alps. The Swiss author Alois Schniedrich wrote, "The stone pine forest is the adornment of the mountains, whose bald skull it decorates with incense-perfumed curls." The stone pine is an astonishing tree. Alone among trees, it can brave temperatures of -45 degrees centigrade and flourishes in an area in which winter rules for most of the year. The stone pine's life happens in slow motion. It doesn't bear a single pine cone before it's 40 years old. Then, when they appear, they take 3 years to ripen, and the stone pine can live for over 1,000 years. To the people here, this forest is almost holy. The God Tamangur, or forest over there, lies in the far east of Graubünden, just a stone's throw from the Italian border. It's a symbol of tenacity, strength, and the will to survive. The Rhaetians also lay claim to these characteristics. For centuries, people mined silver and lead in the area. The mines and the smelting of the ore consumed vast quantities of wood. But this special forest survived this era undamaged. And today, no one may touch it. The God Tamangur, one of the world's highest stone pine forests, is a forbidden zone for axes or saws. Because they grow so slowly, the trees have wafer-thin annual growth rings. The age-old wood is therefore very fine-grained and highly prized. And it smells better than almost any other wood too. But it won't come from here. It's more than 50 years since a pine tree was felled in the God Tamangur. Stone pine forests are profoundly peaceful places, but they would never even exist were it not for a manically active creature. The spotted nutcracker. It's obsessed with stone pine nuts to the exclusion of almost anything else. It can eat so many that it was feared for a long time that the trees would be forced into extinction. But precisely the opposite proved to be true. And that's because this bird has an ability that is unique in the animal world. The story of the spotted nutcracker and the stone pine forest begins in summer. The spotted nutcracker is a hard worker. During the summer months, it gathers around 100,000 stone pine nuts, transporting the pine cones to one special spot to hack them out of the cones. Like Scrooge McDuck with his money, the spotted nutcracker thinks only about its pine nuts. It's a wonder that it can find any time at all for life's trivia, like eating or breeding. The spotted nutcracker sets up around 10,000 stashes of nuts and will find almost all of them again in winter. A few of its stores do go undiscovered, however, and those nuts germinate the following spring. The saplings protect each other against chill winds, excess rain, or from being eaten. With any luck, one of them will grow to be a proud, 1,000-year-old stone pine tree. If the spotted nutcracker didn't exist, these seeds wouldn't get taken up the mountain. The stone pine would only germinate down the valleys where they cannot thrive. Without the birds, these trees would long have vanished from the earth, including the magical forest of god Tamangur. Below the forest, the river Klemgia winds through the valley. The water ousel seems to be the only creature here that isn't hibernating. But it's living proof that the river itself is actually brimming with life. It's constantly diving to take its prey, especially insect larvae, and it's a very successful hunter. Not many know the water ousel, although it's very widespread. Once noticed, they seem to turn up everywhere. As the vegetation indicates, conditions are much harsher in the higher mountain regions. Stone pines do grow at up to 2,800 meters above sea level, very high indeed, but they actually thrive best at below 2,000 meters. Above that, living conditions are too tough, even for the resilient Swiss stone pine. Very cold winters will drive animals that actually prefer a high mountain habitat down into the lower regions. The chamois can find food more easily here, and it's more plentiful than up in the mountain. But the dry grass is not very nutritious. To get enough nourishment, the animals have to eat almost all day long. But the fodder isn't free. The price is interference by human beings. Skiers and snowboarders are the reason why not all the chamois head down into the valleys when food rations become scarce. Several herds prefer to stay further up the mountain, where there are no human beings, but where life is tougher and more challenging. Unlike the ibex, they don't sun themselves, preferring to stay in the shade. Now, in January, it's closed season, so the chamois have no need to fear hunters. Not the ones with guns, at any rate. For the lynx, it's open season on chamois all year round. And golden eagles are especially fond of chamois kids. But sometimes the greatest hazard for chamois is neither man nor animal. All year round, avalanches and landslides pose a tremendous danger for chamois. Snow avalanches in winter and rock and boulder slides the rest of the year. Bigger animals than these chamois or even the ibex may be regularly spotted in the Swiss mountains. One just has to be observant. However, some animals spend their lives in secrecy. Even the hardiest hikers never encounter them. It's as if they simply weren't there. And yet, every year, there are more of them. Since the mid-90s, it's been back in Switzerland. Canis lupus, the bane of Little Red Riding Hood, the fairy tale monster, the big, bad wolf. Anyone following the acrimonious discussion about the wolf might assume that there were hundreds of them roaming about Switzerland, and yet there are only around 30 in 3 packs. Some of the alleged wolves that have been spotted have in fact been dogs. Even wolf researchers hardly ever get to see the object of their research programs. Anyone wanting to study wolves' behavior or film them has to rely on an animal park. Those who try researching them in the wild generally end up examining what they've left behind. Should the Swiss wilderness be home to Europe's biggest predator? The question prompts fierce debate and is almost as old as Switzerland itself. And it's not only conducted verbally, but with shotguns. Wolves are constantly being shot by faceless poachers. Many experts believe that fear of wolves is unwarranted, that the only dangerous wolves are found in children's fairy tales. Across the expanse of the Swiss Alps, there's actually enough room for 150 wolves, not just 30. Others say that wolves are dangerous to both man and beast, and that they have no business in such a densely populated country at all. Now, Gemütlichkeit or conviviality and comfort settles on the towns and villages. The livestock spend the cold season in pleasantly warm stalls, well stocked with feed. The long nights and low temperatures in winter also cause problems for the wolves. Their prey is hard to catch in the deep snow. Winter is a time of hunger and privation for the alleged monster. The valleys, however, seem like a land of milk and honey. So, in extreme winters, some wolves make their way down into the valleys. They're not welcome, though. Any wolf that approaches a settlement should beware of shotguns. If the pack living in the Kalanda range gets too close to town, a young wolf is meant to be shot to scare them off. But the Kalanda wolves are as invisible as if cloaked by magic. Can one protect livestock from wolves? especially in summer, or are they all helplessly at the wolves' mercy? There is actually something that keeps wolves away from the herds when they're outside, and it lives right in the midst of the herd. Herd guard dogs. More and more shepherds, goat herds, and cattle herders rely on them. It seems somewhat paradoxical at first glance that the very creature that protects herds from being attacked by wolves is the wolf's close cousin. But these animals are famous for their unconditional loyalty and protective instincts, and so many guard dogs are born among the sheep or cows. The puppies are raised with their charges, the animals they will be protecting, so there's not the slightest doubt in their minds that they are part of the herd, and they will protect their herd at all costs. Herd guard dogs are not sheepdogs. They don't know how to gather and run a herd. That's a job for specialists like the Border Collie. Herd guard dogs learn another skill: to protect their herd independently and without human intervention, as well as chase off predators. The dogs might sometimes mistake an innocent hiker for a predator. In that case, the clever hiker is well advised to beat a hasty retreat. Wolves that rarely attack domestic animals are persecuted by humans less often, so herd guard dogs are simultaneously wolf pack protection dogs. Winter is the quiet time of year. Supposedly, it's just silently falling snow and peaceful, still lakes. But that's not true all the time or everywhere. Every year, 13,000 cross-country skiers turn the upper Engadine Valley near St. Moritz into sporting pandemonium. For a couple of days, peace and quiet take a back seat. An unusual feature of the Engadine skiing marathon, the course crosses two frozen lakes, Lake Sils and Lake Silvaplana. "40 centimeters below the skiers, the commotion above can't even be heard. Under the ice, the lake is quiet and still. The fish have disappeared to hibernate in the deepest waters. Even the plants seem to languish in the dim light that penetrates the ice shield. It seems as if all of nature is holding its breath, waiting for spring to arrive. But spring takes its time here. Frost, ice, and snow still have the upper hand. Yet the middle of winter is the hottest season for the ibex. They're in rut. It's a busy time for the bucks. They pursue the females tirelessly. Using their tongues and the Jacobson's organ in their nasal chamber, the ibex bucks scan the female's scent for pheromones. And some of them discover the hard way that if the back end doesn't smell right, there's likely to be trouble from the front end. All the bucks in the area are now following the scent of nature. The bewitching aroma of the ladies has a magical attraction for them. Even those who haven't a chance of actually mating, being too far down in the herd's ranks. A ticklish situation for the female that isn't yet ready to mate. The eager bucks corner the female. They are obeying the call of nature, and it's telling them to be more insistent. Passing on their genetic material to the next generation is the buck's highest priority. All the pestering by her love-stricken suitors is getting more and more unpleasant. She senses that the cave isn't going to offer her protection for much longer. Finally, she's had enough and makes a dash for it. But she can't shake off her admirers. The chase ends in tragedy for the female. Hours later, she is spotted injured with a split hoof. She will only survive this harsh winter if it comes to an end soon. And indeed, spring arrives one day in full force. The alpine snowbell is an early harbinger. It starts blossoming under the snow and rings in the spring from there. And with the melting of the snow and ice, everything else follows. Soldiers report for duty, workers start spring cleaning, and the queen busies herself with breeding. The animals have long forgotten winter. They've forgotten the months of privation, hardship, and torpor. Forgotten, too, are those that have fallen victim to the cold. If only it weren't for this wretched winter coat, it's still itchy. The female chamois and their kids now form herds of up to 30 animals. The males are loners and stay away from the herds. It seems that in spring, some chamois have a luxury problem. They're too warm. The experienced mothers now want to head for the highlands, where they don't perspire as much, and where food has started to grow in abundance. But sheer high spirits put paid to that idea for a while. higher the altitude, the longer the wait for spring and warmth to arrive. The higher regions are still covered in deep snow. Winter seems to want to retain its stranglehold, despite blue skies and sunshine. But for some hibernators, it's high time for them to wake up. The marmot's summer is so short, they're constantly in a hurry. Some of the males will even mate with females while they're still sleeping. Depending on the summer, they have just 12 weeks to work their way through the marmot to-do list. There's hardly any time for lengthy relaxation or sunbathing sessions. Whatever happens now, in nature, everything is oriented towards preparing for the next, possibly lethal winter. Summer is spent gathering stores, eating to set up protective layers of fat, breeding the next generation, in short, guaranteeing the future. Because winter in Graubünden can be deadly, while still being strikingly beautiful.